What if I told you that one of the most innocent-looking cartoons from our childhood might actually be one of the darkest shows ever made? That Courage the Cowardly Dog wasn't just a wacky cartoon, but a story about death, trauma, and a reality far more disturbing than anything Cartoon Network ever admitted? Today, we're digging into the real meaning behind Courage the Cowardly Dog, and the hidden theories that might finally explain everything happening in Nowhere. And trust me, by the end, you'll never see this show the same way again. Courage the Cowardly Dog was weird, like really weird. While other cartoons showed light-hearted fables and goofy antics, Courage dropped us into a nightmare desert where a tiny dog battles demons, serial killers, cosmic gods, zombies, and the emotionally unstable. So naturally, fans began asking a simple question. Why? Why is everything in this show so horrifying? And why are Muriel and Eustace so unfazed by it? One of the oldest and most chilling theories is that Courage is actually dead, and the show is his afterlife. Fans on Reddit describe Courage being chased by creatures representing death, navigating surreal spaces that feel more like limbo than reality. In this interpretation, Nowhere isn't a desert. It's purgatory, a place where Courage relives his fears over and over again, desperately trying to protect the only people he ever loved. And here's where it gets darker. Real dogs, especially abandoned or abused ones, often die alone, terrified and confused. Some fans believe Courage's exaggerated fear responses, screaming, shaking, hallucinating, represent a traumatized animal living out the final remnants of consciousness. The next theory hits even closer to home. Many believe the show is actually a metaphor for mental illness. Courage isn't just scared. He's anxious, hyper-aware, constantly catastrophizing, and always spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Reddit users point out that Courage's behavior resembles someone suffering severe anxiety or PTSD. His world constantly shifts. Objects come alive. He imagines impossible monsters, and he feels entirely responsible for protecting the people he loves. In this version, the monsters aren't real. They're manifestations of Courage's inner fears. Muriel represents safety and comfort. Eustace represents neglect and hostility. And Nowhere is isolation, emotional abandonment, a place where no one hears your cries for help. Among all the Courage the Cowardly Dog theories circulating online, one of the most controversial is the idea that the show is a symbolic retelling of Jewish persecution, particularly tied to Holocaust-era displacement. It's a theory that surfaces again and again in fan forums, Tumblr posts, Lost Media Wiki discussions, and Reddit threads. Not because there's explicit evidence, but because certain patterns in the show uncannily resemble themes explored in Holocaust literature and refugee narratives. The idea first appeared in mid-2000s internet discussions, where fans noticed that Courage, Muriel, and Eustace live in extreme isolation, cut off from the world, that they are constantly visited by strange, threatening outsiders, that Muriel carries a thick, old-world European accent, often identified by fans as Scottish, Eastern European, or vaguely Yiddish in cadence. In stories about Jewish refugees during World War II, isolation, displacement, and fear of outside forces are recurring motifs. Courage fans started drawing parallels, not because the show explicitly mentions history, but because the emotional tone mirrors the uncertainty and dread described in refugee accounts. Fans who support this theory point out that Muriel and Eustace rarely leave their home, a common detail in stories of elderly refugees who isolate themselves for safety. They live quietly, avoid outsiders, and cling to routine. In nearly every Courage episode, strangers arrive unannounced, often aggressive, deceptive, or predatory. To supporters of the Holocaust theory, this resembles the repeated trauma survivors feel when confronted with unknown authority figures or threatening outsiders. When you think about it, this theory lines up almost perfectly with how real dogs navigate the world. Dogs have limited understanding of human behavior, unusual objects, and unfamiliar noises. They rely heavily on instinct, fear, curiosity, territoriality. So when a delivery worker approaches the door, a dog doesn't see mailman. he sees stranger, threat, unknown creature. For dogs, fear happens fast. Shadows distort, voices boom, objects seem larger, and unfamiliar shapes become terrifying silhouettes. Courage's world is dark and strange because a dog's world is dark and strange. Once you look at the show through a dog's perception filter, every villain suddenly makes perfect sense. Cats? Fans argue he's not a demon. He's a groomer or pest control worker whose tools and chemicals look terrifying to a dog. Slick voice, sharp objects. To Courage, that becomes a red, soulless monster. Freaky Fred isn't actually supernatural. His weird obsession with naughty hair? That's a barber visiting the house or trimming Courage's fur. Dogs hate grooming. To Courage, Fred becomes a horror villain with scissors for hands. LeQuack, a con artist, sure. But more literally, he's the unsettling stranger dog sense as not right. Someone sneaky. Someone who smells different. Someone who radiates danger. And even Courage's talking computer fits this theory. He doesn't literally talk. Courage is anthropomorphizing the only stable, predictable object in the house. The computer isn't alive. It's just the safest thing Courage knows, so he imagines it, offering help. And here's the detail that really sells this theory. Muriel and Eustace never seem bothered, never scared, never shocked. Because from their perspective, nothing bizarre is happening. Their reactions are always grounded in reality. Muriel is sweet and oblivious, Eustace is grumpy and annoyed, and Courage is the only one losing his mind. Why? Because Courage is interpreting everyday occurrences as supernatural horrors, and the show dramatizes his fear for comedic effect. Fans frequently point to specific episodes that strongly support this idea. The villain is only terrifying through Courage's eyes. In reality, she's just a troubled woman in a mask. Muriel even feeds her calmly, proving the world Courage sees is exaggerated. Fusilli turns people into puppets. Or maybe he's just a quirky theater director, and Courage is misinterpreting props, costumes, and stage mechanisms. Looks like a monster, but could easily be a normal mole or wild animal Courage inflated into a creature of chaos. Talking alien ducks, or farm ducks that Courage perceives as communicating telepathically. Again, exaggeration. In the end, this theory doesn't just explain the monsters, it explains Courage's character. He's a small dog in a big world. He's fearful, but loyal. He doesn't always understand what's happening. He only knows he must protect Muriel. And that's the beauty of this interpretation. Courage isn't a superhero fighting demons. He's a pet doing what all good dogs do, loving his family so much that he'll battle imaginary horrors just to keep them safe. And then there's one of the wildest theories. Courage is actually a Lovecraftian creature, a forgotten god who has suppressed his own powers. One Reddit user writes that Courage is shape-shifting, regeneration, impossible feats of strength, and ability to stretch reality resemble an eldritch horror who forgot what he is. The monsters aren't drawn to Muriel and Eustace, they're drawn to him. Imagine if Courage has spent centuries reincarnating, attaching himself to kind humans. And these daily attacks are the universe trying to reclaim him. After exploring every theory, from purgatory to cosmic horror, what's the actual truth? According to interviews and analyses, the most widely accepted explanation is this. Courage, the Cowardly Dog, is a show about fear, perspective, and unconditional love. The monsters aren't literal. The danger isn't supernatural. The world just feels terrifying when you're small, powerless, and alone. Courage isn't dead. He isn't mentally ill. He isn't a cosmic god. He's exactly what his name says he is. A terrified little dog who finds the courage to protect the only family he has. That's the real meaning of Courage, the Cowardly Dog. And maybe that's why the show resonated with all of us. Because no matter how scary the world looks, Courage is doing everything you can for the people you love, even when you're shaking the entire time. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like, subscribe, and comment below which theory made you rethink your childhood the most.